Welcome again to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to talk about the lightning types. Before coming to the lightning types, let's understand what is Agentforce and how we use the Agentforce to get the answers from the Salesforce or maybe from any of the custom actions that we have in the system. As we know, when we create an agent in the Salesforce, or be it employee type or service type of agent, we also have to have a topic associated with the agent. And within the topic, if you go to back to the topics, I have created this topic flight search, which is kind of giving you the outputs based on the inputs that the user want to have for the flight search. And it does give you the output based on those filters. So this is pretty simple topic and it does have its associated topic action there. Let's see what's the into the topic action. This action I have created and it's of type Apex action. So I have an Apex class in this Salesforce or, and with that Apex class, I have some of the input parameters and one is the output parameters. Of course, because I'm using the Apex class, so this has to be the invocable method. There has to be an invocable method in the Apex class. If I show you the Apex class, so this is the Apex class for my use case. Here I have used the data for the demonstration purposes within the class itself. But in your actual scenarios, this may be coming from the Salesforce or maybe from the APIs or wherever your use case is there. And it does have the input parameter list and it also has the output parameters. So these comprises the topic actions, input and the output. If you see, I have activated this agent and let's see this agent's output in action. Let me refresh this so that I get the latest of the agent section. And when I click on this Agentforce icon at the top, I will be presented with this screen where I can do the conversation of the agent. Simply let me type in here, find flights. So what it does in the backend, it takes the user's utterances and it processes that through the topic and through the topic action. And why I am presented with these boxes, because if you will see here into the topic action, I have the date of travel, destination city, and this origin city. All of these three input parameters are marked as required as well as collect data from the user. And I'm getting those input boxes. Whereas if you see the other filter, this is an option. It may or may not be presented. Okay. Coming back. So if I provide here the details, let's say origin city from Jaipur, Bangalore, and date of travel, let's say the 1st of August. And if I submit this, then you will be seeing the output coming up, right? And this output may not be very user friendly. Okay. One way is, let's say if I go back here and I make certain changes, and this time I click on this, I do not want this show in conversation. And this is the apex filter, save it. Okay, so what happens this time, if you try to again give the same information, let's refresh this, and this time if I will again type in find flights, right? So again if I type in certain this origin city, destination, date of travel, and when I click on submit, it gives an output in a nicer way. But I won't say this is pretty cool even at this time as well, right? So one of the feature that Salesforce has given us is to use the lightning types. What does that mean? You can kind of manipulate the output response of the agent now. This is out of the box that you can do some of the tweaks in the topics and how you can present it on the UI, right? But if you want to make it pretty general, not generic, I would say pretty user friendly, right? Or you want it to be very eye-catching, right? So in that case, what you could be doing is you can create an LWC component and you can embed that LWC component into the Agentforce output section. So let's see how that happens there. I have created one of the lighting type, and to use the LWC component agent in your agent's output, you need to have the lighting types in your Salesforce org. One thing that we need to be aware, or that we need to make sure, that Latin types are only available in version 64 and above. So make sure whenever you are creating the Latin types, you are on latest version, which is 64 and above. So if I come here, and again you can mark it as show in conversation, and here you will see the flight response, right? So this time if you save this and come back again here, and instead of this, let me refresh this page again. I'll show you how the response will then be formatted for the end user. And again, I'm just typing the same thing, find flights. Okay. And with this find flights, I will again enter some of the information, required information, like the origin city, Bangalore, date of travel, let's say today's date, or maybe any future date, and click on submit. Okay, so what happens this time? You see, these are the optional filters. It may or may not be presented all the time. Okay, now you see the output here. So this is pretty eye-catching output, right? Instead of that simple text format, now you have kind of formulated, or you have formatted those output into your own choice, right? So here you see the output in a very nicer way. There you can do the book now and all what you want to do there. Similarly, because this is for the input, similarly, you will also have the same option to go for the inputs as well. For example, right now you are seeing here the input, right? So in the input, this was the Apex defined data type. Here also you have an option to go for custom data type or custom Latin type, where you can use the LWC component there and click on save. So what happens this time? Then this time, instead of this default one or the out of the box one, it will present the inputs in the form of the LWC component. So you see now the data type which is coming up as flight filter, which is the custom type or LWC component. Whereas if you see here, the output which is of type flight response. We'll touch base on these two Latin types in a minute, but just to give you an overview how it will look like, right? Let me refresh this again. And this time, if I again search for find flights, okay, so here also I may or may not be presented with that additional filter, because those filters are not always required. I can simply say additional filters. Okay, so now you see how this is presented to us. And here again, you can say whatever the information you want to present here, or you want to type in here, like the origin city, Bangalore, let's say the date, any date, and this is the LWC component for the input now. Right, this is very nicer way. Even you can kind of have this input into, let's say, this slider, or however you want to present. So that's all up to you. Let's say I want to have 1500, right? And then you can submit this. These are not the mandatory ones, these are the optional ones, and based on that it may give you the outputs. Okay, again, pretty cool, right? So now you can leverage the LWC component either as your input or as your output. Now, if you see here in the quick find box, and if you type in the Latin types, then you will be seeing that there are some standard Latin types, whereas there are now the possibilities where you can create your own custom Latin types. So these are the two Latin types that I have created. Rest others are the standard Latin types. And these standard Latin types you are pretty much well aware of, right? As you come here onto the agent actions, you see this date type or text types. So all these are the standard Latin types. Whereas the custom Latin types are newly supported one in version 64 and above. So let's see how this can be created. So this class we have already touched upon that it has the data for the agent to present, and right now it's only into the Apex class, but based on your requirement you can have it through the Apex classes or through the custom objects, standard objects, or maybe through the use of the APIs. You can take it from the data cloud or wherever you want to take it from, right? Let's jump to the LWC components. One is this the filter components, which is if you come back again here, and this is how I was asking to go with the additional filter set. So we were seeing this component. So this is for that component. It has its associated, this HTML component for that LWC. And this is the output where I am presenting the output in a very nicer way here, right? So this is here and it has this associated LWC component also. The point to note here is if you go back again to your agent actions and you see here when you click on the pencil icon and in the drop down, so here you see it has the flight response in the output column, whereas it has the flight filter into the input column, right? So how come it is differentiating between these two input versus the output? This is because you have defined it into the meta XML file of the LWC component. So you see into the flight details, if you come here again to the flight details, and this is the flight response. So this is something for the Agentforce output. So that's why you are seeing this into the Agentforce output. Whatever you are seeing here, this is the Lightning type. Bear in mind. So this is the Lightning type, not the LWC component. But I'll show you how this LWC component is bind with the Lightning types. But this is because the flight details are for the Agentforce output. So you need to be making sure for any of the output component for the LWC, you need to make sure that in the meta XML, you are setting the target as Agentforce output. And same is for the input. So if it is for the input, then you need to be making sure that the meta XML file has the target with Agentforce input. Now let's jump to the Lightning types, how we create Lightning types, right? So pretty simple, you need to have a folder firstly of Lightning type, and again you need to have, or you need to be using the either VS Code or Cursor or any IDE tool. You cannot create the Lightning type directly going into the Salesforce. You do not have any option there, similar to LWCs. So you create a folder called Lightning types, and within that folder you will create your Lightning type there. So one is the flight filter and one is the flight response. So you see this flight response, right? So this flight response, if you see this flight response is actually coming up here in the drop down, this flight response. Whereas this flight filter is coming to the drop down of input column here, this flight filter. And how have I kind of bind those LWC component with this? So if you see within the each Lightning type, this is the Lightning desktop Gen AI, and same is true for of input type where you will see Lightning desktop Gen AI. So what is the difference between these two input versus output? For the input, you need to define the editor.json, whereas for the output, you need to define the renderer.json. The content inside this will be pretty much similar in terms of syntaxes, but you need to be making sure whenever you are defining your Lightning type for inputs into the agent, then it has to have the editor.json into the Lightning desktop Gen AI folder. And here you see, this is how you override the component where you are defining the LWC component here. The definition comes from this LWC component flight details, right? This is for output. Currently, I am opening the flight response and it has the renderer.json, which has the flight details. And this flight details was actually responsible for rendering the output in a very nicer way or nicest way. And this is why you are seeing here the Lightning types here, the flight response. Similarly, if you see the editors.json, so it's referencing the LWC component named flight request filter. And if you see this flight request filter, this is an LWC component flight request filter, and this has the two inputs, one for the price and one for the discount percentages. And that same will then be available to use into the agent's input here. So if you see in the drop down, you will see the flight filter, which is bind with this flight filter as the Lightning type, and inside this you will have this editor.json, and in that you are binding the LWC component. Next part is the schema.json, where you will define what should be the title for this and descriptions and the Lightning types there. What does this mean is we are kind of defining this filter basis on certain of the properties, and these properties are defined here into the Apex class, right? So if you go to the Apex class, and in the Apex class you will see the flights as the inner class, where it has invocable variables with these two prices, with these two properties. One is the price and one is the discount percentage. And same holds true for the other as well. If you go to the schema.json for the flight response, and here also you will see it's for the available flights, which is again coming up from the Apex class flight response, flight agent. This will then be presented to the end user. Coming back to these title and the descriptions, it's pretty easy if you are providing these two things so that you can find it where it is coming from. So you see into the label, it's coming up as flight request filters and flight search response, and the descriptions here into your lightning types. So whatever you define here, flight search response, this is coming up here. And similarly for the other, if I open the schema.json for the flight filters, you will also see the flight request filters. So this is fine here. Okay, so I hope now you have understood how the Lightning types can be very beneficial in terms of the inputs and the outputs, and how you can kind of uh, shape the output of the agent based on your need or your requirement. Thank you very much, and this is all for today.